Let's hope that they come back down again. If they come down quickly, then not much damage done. But if they stay up for a significant period of time, then we can all look forward to another couple of slightly miserable years.
I'm joined now by Josh Glancy, Associate Editor of the Sunday Times. Hello, Josh.
Good morning. I've realised that on all the times I've been on this show, I've never heard anyone win.
That's because Colin from Hampshire was there for a long time.
Yeah, I felt a sort of little shiver of emotion there. That was quite
Have you not noticed
unexpected.
there's boxes of DAB radios piling up under my desk? You know, I have to sit pushed back. My legs don't go under it anymore. There's just so many of them. Colin from Hampshire was there. I think he was there for about 4 or 5 months.
Right.
Yeah, but now...
Well, a good quiz is a hard quiz.
The age of Mike from Mortlake begins. Long may it last. Well, I say long may it last. It'd be nice if someone won today. No offence, Mike. Anyway, let's crack on, Josh. Obviously, the war. Keir Starmer's been speaking at an event in London this morning. He's been trying to reassure the British public about the impact of the war in the Middle East. Let's have a listen.
At the moment, what we're doing is monitoring the risk, working with others to mitigate the risk. The Chancellor is talking to the Bank of England every day to make sure that we're ahead of that. I would just say on energy prices for households, the energy price cap is in place until June, and therefore we're not anticipating that is going to change, which will give a degree of reassurance. But of course, businesses and others will be concerned to watch carefully what's going on.
Well, the Prime Minister was asked at that press conference if President Trump was gambling with World War III. He didn't engage with that, but he said it was right that Britain was going to be helping to defend allies in the region, and said we do need to find a way to de-escalate the situation. We know that Keir Starmer spoke to President Trump for the first time in 8 days last night. Downing Street said the two discussed the situation in the Middle East, no surprise there, and military cooperation between the UK and the US. Josh, I suppose it's inevitable that what Starmer wants to focus on is the impact on energy prices rather than his epic falling out with Donald Trump, or indeed just the war itself, over which we have very little control.
Yeah, I mean, I do sometimes feel quite sorry for Keir Starmer in the sense that to be Prime Minister of the UK and have Donald Trump become President of America has obviously dictated his diplomatic role enormously, because he's had to put enormous capital and effort into keeping Trump on side, keeping the Americans involved in Ukraine. That's been a massive challenge for him. But at the same time, there is a limit, and he reached that limit last week with Iran, and he then now has to deal with the falling out with Trump, which is also a massive problem. And at the same time, he spent the last 5 months saying, we are a government that is laser focused on the cost of living. He told me in November, that's our North Star now. You know, that's really, we're sort of orienting our whole political focus around cost of living. And now we appear to be entering an oil shock, which could just sort of throw all that out the window. So
his two main planks have just disintegrated in the space of a couple of days. Exactly.
Cost of living, and I get on with Trump, and Trump has literally just blown those two up. So I do feel a bit sorry for him, and he faces a real challenge to get either of those things heading in the right direction.
But he's also handling it in a very Keir Starmer way. So polling by YouGov shows that 70% of the country opposes Britain joining the US attacks. How much of the public do you think has noticed that Keir Starmer agrees with them?
Well, I spent a lot of time talking to people around Starmer last week, and their feeling was that they were right on the politics. You're right to point out that the messaging isn't always the best, but I think they felt that they were right on the politics, and that Starmer standing up in Parliament and saying this government does not believe in regime change from the skies, I mean, that was a big moment. Yeah. And if anyone was paying attention, they will know that. So he's not sort of identified as a supporter of this war now.
That's true.
And although the falling out with Trump is a massive diplomatic issue, it does help feed into some domestic support, I think, because Trump is very unpopular. The war is unpopular. If petrol prices go through the roof, it's going to become a lot more unpopular, and they may well do, because we're expecting at least another couple of weeks of this. So I think they do feel that the politics of it are on their side, but it does give them a massive diplomatic headache.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. Look, let's focus on the economics of this a little bit, particularly the impact of rising energy prices. Let's speak to the show's cheerful Chancellor, Times columnist and economist, Paul Johnson. Hello, Paul.
Morning.
Thanks for being with us. Look, Paul, Donald Trump says oil prices are a small price to pay for security. Economically speaking, is that right? Higher oil prices being a small price to pay?
Well, they're quite a big price to pay. I mean, whether it's the right price is something for the politicians to decide. But higher oil prices, and they've touched nearly $120 a barrel this morning. I think they're a bit down from there now, and that's going to have a significant negative effect on the economy. That'll probably, if it's maintained there, it'll take, I'd have thought, at least half a point off growth this year. That doesn't sound like much, but that is quite a lot. That's going to create problems for the public finances, and it's going to make us all worse off. So I'm afraid I'm being as cheerful as usual this morning, because I'm afraid there just is no doubt that this, if energy prices are up, the UK and other countries dependent on energy will just be worse off, at least for the period that they're higher. Now, let's hope that they come back down again. If they come down quickly, then not much damage done. But if they stay up for a significant period of time, then we can all look forward to another couple of slightly miserable years.
How does this compare, Paul, with the energy shock when the Ukraine war began? Is it similar? Is it worse? Is it not quite as bad?
Well, so far it's not as bad. Prices haven't spiked anything like as much. Gas prices haven't gone up anywhere near as much, and that was very painful. Of course, the prices remained high for a while. We found other ways of, the world found other ways of getting hold of gas, but those ways included, of course, extending the amount that we get from the Middle East. If Russian supplies are cut off and Middle East supplies become harder to get at, then it's possible that the long-run consequences might be more. I mean, but I think I'd have thought over the next year we're not looking at the sorts of spikes that we had back then.
What does that mean then for the prospect of any kind of government intervention in this? I mean, the government has made a great play of taking £150 off energy bills from the spring. Obviously, that's sort of in some doubt now. But should we expect any kind of sort of trust-style energy support scheme looming?
Well, it becomes, I mean, the problem is that was certainly in prospect immensely expensive, tens and tens of billions of pounds. And one of the things that we haven't invested in the meantime, I have to say slightly to my slightly to my despair, is any way of targeting this help. So remember that most of the help last time round went to everybody, including people like you and me, who might have liked it but didn't particularly need it. And it's because the government still doesn't have good data on who is both low income and a heavy user of energy. So they simply reduce the price for everyone, and that's why it costs an absolutely staggering amount of money. And now I'm afraid that we're in an even less good position to do that now, because of course debt is higher, interest rates are still pretty high. It will be very difficult. I mean, not impossible, but it would be difficult for the government to spend that kind of money. Now, they might decide to temporarily increase benefits for people on low incomes, for example, or reduce the bills for people who are on benefits. So target something tightly at the people on the lowest incomes. I think giving an across-the-board reduction is just very, very expensive.
Explain to us, Paul, how this is impacting on gilt yields this morning, because we know they're sort of leaping around in a sort of in a way a bit reminiscent to the way that they responded to Liz Truss too. What's the link here? Why is this happening?
Essentially, markets are expecting one of the results of this to be higher inflation. If there's higher inflation, then two things. First, it's likely that central banks will either increase interest rates or at best not reduce them in the way that was expected. So if the return you can get on cash is higher than you expected, then you're going to want a higher return on government debt. But also if inflation is higher, then the value of that government debt falls over time. So you want a higher return. If you want a higher return on it. It also, of course, just going back to our previous conversation, increases the risk that governments will end up more in debt than they otherwise were going to be, either because they're bailing people out or just because the economy's growing less strongly, and so we're borrowing more than we expected. So all of those things are going to be making people less happy about holding government debt, which means that they want a higher return on it. And that's, of course, just bad news. I mean, your previous Josh Glancy said he feels sorry for Keir Starmer. It is hard not to feel sorry for the Chancellor, who keeps getting buffeted by these things just as you think things are beginning to calm down.
Well, just to make matters even worse, Paul, there are reports this morning that John Healey, the Defence Secretary, is going to go to the Treasury to ask for more money. How difficult would it be for the government to move from the roughly, 2 to 2.5% of GDP on defence to something closer to 3% or even 3.5%, and to do it quickly?
Well, I mean, governments can always do things quite quickly on defence in the short run. So defence spending, spikes when we are in conflict. That tends to come out of at least officially out of the Treasury Reserve. So they give the money this year, but they don't give it again next year. What I suspect that John Healey's asking for, though, is a permanent increase in defence spending, and that just becomes more and more difficult. Again, if you look at the Chancellor's numbers, she's betting on, in order to meet her ironclad fiscal rules, you look closely at her numbers and they involve spending on things other than defence and health actually being squeezed really tight, probably being cut in the last year of this Parliament. Now, that's almost impossible in any case. You're not going to be cutting public spending in an election year. You increase defence spending even more, then that puts more pressure on public spending, other sorts of public spending, or it means increasing taxes. Or I suppose what she might do is say, look, my fiscal rules were ironclad, but look, we've got an unexpected war. We're actually going to borrow more. And again, that's one of the reasons markets are concerned and why we're paying more for our borrowing.
Do you know what, Paul? I think I'm going to give the optimism meter a miss this week. I'm not sure I can quite bear to turn it on.
You're pretty sure what it'll say, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think I'm going to pretend the fuse is gone and it's just not working. Paul Johnson, look, always a pleasure to speak to you, despite the grim prognosis that we get, but still, lovely to speak to Paul. Thank you to Paul Johnson, our cheerful Chancellor. You can read his column in thetimes.com, of course, as always.